Today, we're going to have a little bit of that, but today's going to be a little bit more about that technical stuff. People wanted to know about what is shutter speed, what is aperture, and some of these kinds of things. So we're going to go into that a little bit more today. And I know it sounds like a complicated thing, but it all applies to any camera you're using. And so when you hear these words, don't dismiss them and think that it only applies to um, fancy DSLR cameras. It also applies to you with a phone. So that's my quick intro. Bernie, would you like to open with anything?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you all for attending. And we hope that this proves to be helpful for you. Um, I am a bit older than Pravin, so I'm a little more attached to SLRs and DSLRs. And the only thing that I comment on that is that the camera that you can hold up to your eye that weighs a couple of pounds and is steadied by your head is going to be better at keeping movement down. Whereas if you're using a phone and they really are nice and everything, but the only way that you can trip the shutter is to touch the surface of the device, and that's has a tendency to cause just a little bit of shake. So if you have the opportunity to get a DSLR, if you already have one, that's a preferred choice. At least it is for me. So, but enough on that. Back to Praveen.
Okay, so I'm going to just look at the poll results. You can still answer, I think. So it seems like about half of you had joined us last time, and about half of you are new for this time. And then it looks like the people who did join last time were able to get something out of it. And hopefully, what you got out of it resulted in helping you take better pictures. Some people didn't attend, of course. And then some of you who attended but didn't have an opportunity to put any of that to use. That happens. We end up joining a workshop on the day that it's put on. It doesn't mean that we're able to actually do any of those things right then at that time. And so what's the type of camera that you think you'll be using most often? So Bernie just told us about using a DSLR, and phone, it seems to be the most common, right? Everybody has a phone. There's also drone. So drone is right. It's a drone, but it's also a camera, right? That's the point of drone. Isn't just for flying a thing. It's actually, and it's really cool. I've had a chance to work with drones just a little bit, but it's its own art form. And then other device, nobody said anything. Um, then, how would you rank your knowledge? So this part is going to be important because we're addressing these things. So seems like most of everybody joining today is ranks themselves as a beginner, and then some people think they're kind of in the middle. They know a little bit. They're not beginners, and then one person is very familiar with some of these concepts. So our presentation today is kind of towards going to be towards like the beginner to medium. We'll probably speak into more advanced topics because both Bernie and I do have the experience of that. But a lot of it is going to start with some of these. It's going to help the beginners a little bit more probably. Uh, and you're welcome to like message in the chat or raise your hand if you'd like to. Maybe you have some tip or something that comes to mind for you, and we can give you a chance to say something. So we're going to have an activity that. Oh, I forgot to share my screen. Let me share my screen. And so photography part two, right? We're going to be looking at some of the technical aspects of photography. And the first few of these are just a little bit of review. And for those of you who weren't able to join last time, so our mission, why do we even do this? Why do we have a media team, and why do centers have a media team? A region has a media team. Bala introduced me as being a media committee, media person, all those things. Why is that? Why do we have that group? Why does that wing exist? Well, here's when you go to the about page of SSSIO.org, SSSIO.US, and many SSSIO websites, and you will hear that the organization carries forth the mission and so on. But here's the important part of this is that its goal is to help people realize the divine principle innate in every human being. So the way that we get to help with that is well, there's lots of ways that we can help with that, but this is the purpose of why do we have a media team? Why do we take this so seriously? Because we're part of this. We're part of helping people realize that divine principle in the ways that we're able to. Uh, and so this will make more sense to you as we go on. So on our work, what we're doing is we're inspiring devotees by showing them examples of Swami's teachings being practiced around the world. So Eternal Companion is one example. USA, we have an email newsletter that goes out that has a bulletin of stories. The website has those. On the international side, we have a website called Universe. Um, there are a lot of places, and there's newsletters. There's a lot of places where we get to read about people doing these wonderful things. People are doing so many amazing acts of service, loving service. Um, and then there's events that people are having. They may not be a service activity, maybe that they celebrated Swami's birthday. Mahashivratri is coming up just around the corner. And so maybe people celebrated that. And so, we get to see reports about these kinds of things. If we don't report about it, people don't necessarily know that it happened. Um, I've met a lot of people who maybe moved to the United States and they were Sai devotees from India or wherever they came from. And they spent 2, 3 years in the USA, not even knowing that there was a Sai center just down the street from them or just a few minutes away from them. It didn't occur to them that they maybe could Google or for it or something. They just assumed that there wasn't anything because they just didn't know. And so it's kind of in that same world. We inspire devotees by showing them the activities that are going on, and that's one of the ways that it feels good to know that, hey, that's my team, and we're doing great stuff. I wish I could be over there helping these refugees in Ukraine or refugees over here. I can't, but I'm glad that somebody is. So that's one of the important things that happens from our reporting activities. And a problem that we sometimes run into is that people think, yeah, okay, I get it. You tell about stories, but I mean, like, really, it's, what is it? It's really just people taking selfies and group shots and just all these post pictures. And I just think they do it for themselves and it's for their friends. I mean, I don't care about these people. It feels like they're doing it for attention. And that's not really true. It's just that people haven't been trained on what to take pictures of and what to present pictures of. So this is the common thing that you might see on your Instagram, on your Facebook, and other places is group shots like this. And this is great. And maybe it's you and your friends. But if you're trying to tell the story of Swami's teachings in practice about selfless service and so on, these pictures don't do it. And what's happened is a lot of people have seen this kind of thing and they have that impression that, it's just about people showing off, people doing it for attention. It's not. It's really more about this. Here are the pictures that the same photographers would take, and here are the pictures that we would want to present to the world. Look at each one of these happy faces, service being done. You can just see that love. It's palpable, right? This is Swami's teachings being put into practice. So showing this kind of thing is what inspires people. So this is about photography. There's also videos we can make. There's Eternal Companion and other kinds of publications we can make. So this is what media does, is one of our activities. So I'm going to hand it over to Bernie about, let's jump into some of the topics.
Yeah,
So,
before you change slides too,
okay.
just hold on, go back a second. Because, yeah, I just want to comment that, we look at these photos that are there, these and the ones before, and we may not necessarily think about, well, these people are doing stuff, these people are doing service, the others are all just looking at the camera and smiling. But we get that impression within us, and the people that look at it take that away without consciously thinking about it. The biggest difference between photographs and text, what we read, is that the text comes through in words that we understand in one part of our mind, but the photograph comes straight through into our feelings. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're taking photographs. It's why they say a photograph can be worth 1,000 words, and it can be worth even more than that. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the next picture. And yeah, there we are. And so this one I have to show people because of its history. This goes back to the Second World War. It's a photograph that was taken on Iwo Jima, which during the war was a crucial crucial and very bloody battle that was fought. Then, and the U.S. Marines finally were victorious there. And this photograph was taken by a photographer that was with them, uh, Rosenthal, and he was just lucky to get the picture. He was climbing up. He thought that he'd missed it. And then he just saw that they were starting to raise the flag and just kind of grabbed his camera and just shot it. And of course, this was before the days of SLRs and that sort of thing. So he had no idea what he got. It was on film. And they took the film and he took a couple of photographs. You'll see the second one in a minute. And then sent the whole roll back. And within a week, this photograph was on the front page of every newspaper in America. And it was so significant. It really made a huge difference in what people saw, what they thought, how they felt about the war. Go on to the second picture because this was the picture that he took a little bit after that. This picture, it's a nice picture. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's looking at the camera. The flag is flying straight out. It looks great. This one didn't appear in any newspaper anywhere in America. But it probably ended up on the walls of people's living rooms, especially the people that are in the photograph. So they were grateful for it, but there's no action in it. And that's the difference between a photograph of action and a photograph that's essentially a large selfie that was taken at the time. So, and down at the bottom, you'll notice there's a Wikipedia reference there. I would really recommend people to take a look at that because this photograph, not this one, but the one that you just saw a minute ago, was from the time it was taken. It was really realized what a fantastic photograph it was, how flawless it was, and how much it made. There's statues that have been made of this, a number of them. One even at the Marines Center is there, and it was early on was made. So there's bronze statues of this particular photograph that are all over. One thing I will add, though, that while Mr. Rosenthal got credit for this photograph, I have to say that it was Swami who actually took the photograph. He made it happen, and that's also something else that we should kind of keep in mind as we do photography as well. It's Swami is the doer, even in photography.
So Bernie had just mentioned it about good pictures, about showing action, right? People standing in a group shot is not showing action. They're just posing and standing. And those pictures are fine for those people who are in it. But for us who are not, don't know them and we're just looking to get a story out of it, right? The good pictures that we need to show action. So it's clear. There's no confusing or unusual poses or hand gestures, right? You can see right here. Something has been given to someone. So there's action happening right there. So this is a classic, typical example. What do we not want to do? We want to avoid pictures where it's pictures of objects and there's no people in them, where just a picture of a sign or just a picture of an altar, for example. Might be a beautiful altar, but a lot of times what happens with these altars is that it's a beautiful experience to be there, in there, and be in front of it and singing in front of it and doing all that. You are not able to capture the majesty of this on a picture. It just doesn't happen. I don't know if any of you have been to the Grand Canyon or Niagara Falls or places like this. You have to be there, right? You have to live it. You can take all the pictures you want and you can take some good pictures of it, but it's just not it's difficult. So in the same way, when we have altars and all these kinds of things, what happens is that it was a beautiful experience for you, the photographer, but for us as a viewer who doesn't know what's going on at all, it works out better if we actually see people in there. So like objects without people, for example, at the upper, the upper left of that, we're showing some supplies that probably would have been part of a service project where recipients received a box of cereal and some bread and these things. They probably put them in a bag and these bags were distributed in some way. Yes, it's nice to see what did they give, but what's more useful and more inspiring isn't to get inventory of what was given, but to actually see the devotees maybe packing it and giving it. So this next picture, see, we could have shown the chairs before and the chairs after, but much more interesting is watching these people actually working on the chairs and doing the work, right? This is an action shot. This has people in it. So to always remember that people in the picture makes the viewer respond just a lot more, and it's the definition of, needing something to have action. So,
Let me cut in here and share a little bit about this because I especially like this photograph. And if you take a look, it's balanced. So there's two people in the center of it. One's leading to the right, the other one is kind of on the left. They're in parallel. They're both working on chairs, and then to the left of them is, at least as I'm seeing it, is a young lady working on another one with a brush. On the right side, there's two people that are working on them. So we see the whole thing, and the whole project. So we get the idea from that this was a significant project, that there's five people working on it. They're young people. They're wearing masks, so this is probably COVID time. A lot of information that can come into us from this photograph that we don't even necessarily absorb in word form, but we see it. And by seeing it, we have a reaction to it. And it makes it bonds with us in a certain way. And so those are the things. Now, you can't take a photograph like this by asking, okay, you stand in the back and you stand up front here. Let me put this chair over here and pose it. Okay, that's not going to work. But what you can do as a photographer is be alert to it. And when you see an opportunity like this, you're there and you can take that photograph in a second. And that's what really makes the difference between somebody that's doing this sort of work, taking portraits in a studio with flash and everything like that set up, and somebody who's taking pictures of what's happening in the instant that they happen. Back to you, Pravin.
Okay, so next so we have this concept about context. We talked about this last time. Context is the picture that you just saw, for example. There's something going on. There's a story being expressed, right? There's a subject. There's something going on here, right? It's not just some picture of a flower or a bucket. Even if it had been a picture of a flower or a bucket, there's still a way that it may be expressing something. So context helps the viewer, just become part of the story, understand the story a little bit better. I want to introduce another word to you is composition. So I know that composition also ends up being about where are the people placed in the picture? Is there perspective happening? Some things like that. So composition is going to be a little bit more of what we talk about this time. Is just we're going to talk about how you plan the process. Right? You have an idea that you're trying to express. So we're going to talk a lot about how do you actually plan that? How do you actually express it? And so we're going to get started with a very simple activity, and we're going to go back to this. So whatever it is that you end up using for this, keep it handy, okay? So what we're going to do is find just in your vicinity some kind of hand-sized object, something. For example, I have this mug near me. So, and it's a hand-sized object. It's small enough for me to do something with. But so in your vicinity, you may have something, eyeglasses, keys, something like that. So find a hand-sized object. The next thing is, I don't know whether you have your DSLR, if you have a DSLR, if you have it ready, or if you're joining this call on the phone. But what we want you to do is place the object somewhere and place it in some nice way. Like if it was a person, you'd be posing it, pose that object in some kind of way. Don't take a picture yet. Just place it, pose it, and kind of imagine what you think would make a great picture of this. If this was going to be on a Time magazine cover, picture of the year, National Geographic, how would you want this to be placed? What angle are you going to be at? And just imagine that shot, right? And then go ahead and take that picture. If you join this call on your phone, it's totally fine. Usually Zoom doesn't prevent you from taking a picture or something while you're in the meeting. But if you find that you need to exit the meeting so you can take the picture and then you can rejoin it. So that's totally fine. That might happen. If you're using a DSLR, you won't have that problem. So imagine the shot that so I'm going to hold up my object, and then like what angle would I want to use? Would I want to show that it's got, something in it, or I want to emphasize that it's empty, all that kind of stuff. And then take that picture. So you can give you about this had to take about a minute for you to do that. While that's happening, I know that Jan had a problem. Everybody's able to see the presentation, right? If you're not able to, this happened last time as well. In Zoom, there's a window that shows you the presentation, and sometimes that window is behind something or somehow went off screen, and that would be the reason that you can't see. Okay, so it's not quite a minute, but let's go back in. So how did it go? Look at the picture that you took, and then remember what you were trying to imagine. And so, what are some of the differences between what you saw in your mind and versus what you actually got? So for that, you're welcome to put that in the chat, or if you want to unmute and just let us know. We want to get at, so yeah, just share with us. Usually our imagination is much wilder than what we're able to actually accomplish with the pictures. We're going to learn today more about how to accomplish those things. Does anybody want to share anything?
Supriya mentions in a direct chat, it got blurrier than anticipated in portrait mode.
Remember, I was just talking about having the altar, how beautiful it is, how beautiful the Grand Canyon is, but you have to be there. And so in our head, we think we took a best picture ever. And then other people look at it and they think, yeah, that's nice. They don't get excited the way you did. And so, yeah, things happen when we actually take that picture or that video. We only learn later on that, oh, no, the camera was shaking. Remember, Bernie was saying that if you're taking a picture using a phone, you have to actually press the phone in some way. And sometimes that shakes the camera, your camera. So it happens often that what we had in our mind's eye didn't actually get a chance to play out. So so what we're going to do next, and Supriya kind of did this, she went into portrait mode. If you have a phone, and if you have a recent phone, it probably has a portrait mode or some kind of advanced setting, right? So what you'll do is you'll press the icon to open the camera app on your phone, and then you'll be in the camera app. And then there'll be, there'll be options for taking a video or a picture or a panorama, that kind of thing. And nowadays, a lot of phones have a portrait mode of some kind. Hopefully your phone does. So what we're going to do this time is, if you have a phone, we're going to go into portrait mode on the phone. And Supriya was just saying that something came out blurrier than she expected. That's because portrait mode has some settings available to you. An iPhone portrait mode has certain settings, and the Android phone will have probably similar settings. They may just be labeled differently. What we want you to do is be in your portrait mode, and we're going to pick some setting, any setting that you see that's available to you. Like say on iPhone, see portrait mode, and this is a typical Android for the portrait mode. When you get into portrait mode, see on this iPhone, it has this thing right here about natural light. To left of it, it's got this 2x indicator, right? So 2x on the iPhone and on other phones is about how zoomed in it's going to be. This natural light is one of the ways that you can manipulate lighting effects on it. What I want you to do is find a setting, get into that setting on your phone, and just find what happens to it. Find what happens if you set that number really low. Find what happens if you set that number really high. So take a picture with that setting low and take another picture with that setting high. So that's on the phone. The same thing applies to you if you have one of these. This has settings as well. This is a Canon camera, and your specific camera may not have this exact dial, but it has something like this, right? It'll have a dial that has modes on it, like M manual, P program, A automatic, and so on. This particular camera has this extra plus and minus setting. If you have a DSLR, go into one of these, change into like a AV or TV, And what you'll see is that something will show up on your phone that allows you to change a setting. AV is aperture. So that's we'll talk about aperture soon. TV is a time value, and you'll get a chance to set a high number or a low number. So I'm going to give you about another minute to, if you weren't already doing it, to on your phone or on your DSLR, go in there and just get a picture at low number of some setting and a high number of some setting. And then while we're saying that, one of the people said that when they took a picture of their object, that the background was distracting and they hadn't noticed that. They didn't think about that. We talked about that in the previous workshop, about being aware of what's going on. Okay, so thank you for those of you who actually had a chance to try and see how portrait mode works. So same thing. What happened? What differences did you notice if you're able to set something low and high? Like on portrait modes, you can sometimes you can usually make your background blurrier or less blurry. You can make things brighter and darker. So were you able to make any of that happen? You can chat or you can unmute and let us know what kind of differences did you see? Sometimes I get direct message and you don't all see it. So anyway, like I said, what's going to happen is that exactly that, right? You're going to see that something became brighter, less bright, darker, things like that. So these are settings on your phone. While we were brainstorming about this workshop, we realized that, as Bernie mentioned, DSLRs have so many controls and phones don't necessarily have all of those. We'll have a future photography workshop that's much more just focused on mobile phones and taking pictures on them. There are some free apps that you can get for your phone, totally free. And they give you some of these DSLR kinds of controls. Like see this dial right here. See all this? You can get that on your phone. It's already there on your phone, but you just don't have it available to you the normal way. Okay, so let's get technical now. Okay, so there's this concept in photography about just exposure, right? When we look at a picture, what are we looking at? We're thinking about exposure level. Is it bright? Is it dark? If it's too dark, is it too bright, right? So that's about exposure, right? If it's too dark, that picture may not be as useful because people aren't able to make out anything in it. If it's too bright, it's like blown out, it's just over, again, people can't make out much in it. So that whole aspect of exposure, there's a triangle I'll show you next, but it has three elements. And to get proper exposure, you have to like play with all three. It's like it's either one or two of them or three of them, but it involves fiddling and juggling with those. So one of them is called ISO. You may have seen this on your cameras and for the longest time not know what it means. I forgot now what ISO means, but ISO refers to
International
Standards Organization. Yeah. And so why is that? Is because what happened is that when people invented film and people invent whatever, we need to know that, 10 pounds of something is 10 pounds of something for everybody. It's the same 10 pounds. It's not that somebody else, for them, it's actually 11 pounds, right? So ISO number came from film, would have a rating of how sensitive it is. And so that standardized that, right? So if I buy film from Fuji and it says it's ISO 200, that needs to be the same sensitivity that Kodak's ISO 200 was. And so I think now we just call it ISO and people might prefer numbers. So, but it's light sensitivity. It's how, what is the ability of this film or your camera sensor to just, light sensitivity. You have light sensitivity. If you're sitting in a dark room and the lights suddenly come on, your eyes react to that, right? So the next one is aperture. So your eyes have pupils. And what will happen is that your pupils will dilate and your brain automatically makes them constrict or widen to allow more and less light to come in. Right. So if you're in a dark room, what will happen is that your pupils will dilate to let more light in so that you can try to make something out. If the lights suddenly come on, well, your pupils were really big and you might not, be temporarily blinded for like a half second or something because your aperture was wide open, your brain will then like close it down. It'll constrict, and so to restrict the amount of light, because your brain doesn't want you to live in that overexposed place, right? It can almost hurt too. Shutter speed, I also have an analogy about your eyes to that. So shutter speed is how long the camera was looking, and it can also impact about something about movement it'll get into. So what does that mean, how long your camera was looking? So let's go back to the example of you were in the dark room for quite a while. The lights suddenly came on, they're too bright. So your brain will try to make the aperture smaller, and you might close your eyes, right? That's the other way that you can protect yourself from dealing with all this extra light that came in. And so let's say this light is still on and your eyes are still too sensitive from this dark room that you're in. So you're going to open your eyes very slowly to acclimate to this new level of light, right? And so you might like, blink open really quickly and then blink closed and just kind of slowly get acclimated, right? You're probably not going to just walk out there with your eyes wide open. And that usually ends up looking weird. So anyway, this is what we're talking about is how long are we like looking at the thing? Again, this will make more sense soon. This is related to something about object motion, which will become more clear. Let me show you the next slide. So these are the three: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. Okay, so you see how there's like a balance of these things. So let me show you. So aperture is these. This is the opening that's allowing light to come in. So lower numbers, f1.4, f1.2, numbers like that, are wide open. All the lights being allowed in. This is what's going to happen if you're in a dark kind of setting. Can happen in a bright setting too, but that's typical that not happen. You see that there's other f values, and then 16, there's 22, it can go higher than that. So the higher numbers mean it's more and more constricted, okay? Shutter, let me talk about ISO. So ISO is sensitivity. So that's along the bottom of this particular triangle. So it comes in numbers, 100, 200, 400. These are powers of 2. Digital cameras can actually have other numbers on top of that. So what you're seeing along the bottom is it starts out like nice bright white. And as you go on, it starts to get grayer, right? You see how it gets more gray, and it's also getting a little bit grainy. What happens with ISO is that as you increase the sensitivity, higher and higher numbers, the picture quality goes down a little bit, because what's happening is that the electronics are kicking in, trying to enhance the picture to show you, see in the dark. And that enhancement process ends up losing some image quality. That's in electronic cameras. When you had film, it's a similar concept. The film that was much more sensitive like that quite often wasn't as detailed. Okay, shutter, right? Shutter speed. I called that about looking. We also had that note about movement. So shutter speed is how long the lens is like open to take the picture. So low numbers like are that it's open longer. High numbers are that it's open for much shorter. So what we're looking at is on this chart, low number 1/8, right? There's a 1/8 of a second. And then there's 1/15th, 1/30th, 1/60th. These get faster and faster. So 1/8 of a second is, just think about it in your mind. Don't even think about 1/8. Let's just think about how long is 1 second? 1 Mississippi, right? That's quite a while. What's half a second? It's not going to be 1 Mississippi. It's going to be like 1, right? It's going to be a lot shorter. And so what happens, this is the movement aspect of it, and you can kind of see that in the graphic that they have here. When you're opening, when your shutter speed is low, it's capturing a lot more. And if things are moving, they're going to come out blurry. And so as you increase your shutter speed, it's increasing the shutter is going to catch those things in that moment of time, in that split second. And so that's what the connection was between shutter and blurriness. We're going to show you some examples to make sense. It'll make more sense. But inside this triangle, you're seeing that they're showing you that things become brighter on this axis about aperture as you have the lower aperture, right? Things become brighter on ISO scale as you increase that number of sensitivity. On shutter, things become brighter as the shutter is open longer and exposure happens. this is the first time you've heard about this, welcome to learning about it. These are things that you end up mastering over time. But this is what's happening behind the scenes on your camera. Let's go look at, let's talk about these just a little bit more. Okay, so ISO. And Bernie, please jump in anytime for any of these. Right, so ISO was about light sensitivity, right? So what'll happen is if you need to compensate for a very bright or very dark environment, you can change the ISO. If it's very dark, you would probably pick a higher ISO because it gives you more sensitivity, right? And lower numbers of ISO are usually very sharp, and higher numbers are useful because it's dark, but they can get kind of grainy. This next image, it tries to kind of it's kind of an example of that, right? It's trying to show you graphically that as you have lower ISO, the image quality is quite sharp. But as you start cranking it up, on the other end here, they cranked it way up. The image is there, but it's got a lot of grain on it. It's not as clean.
Noise.
Yeah, noise, right? On digital cameras, we call that noise and grain too, but on film, we call it grain. It's called grain because the film itself consists of a bunch of molecules of stuff that actually is light sensitive. And so to get this, you would actually see it. And that's what the grain was. Okay, so that's ISO. We're talking about aperture and shutter next. So going back to the DSLR, these were what those numbers were when you on your little dial, right? One, they don't necessarily look exactly like this, but this is the kind of thing that you see on them, right? You'll see M. M means manual. AV is aperture priority. This means that you select an aperture and the camera automatically picks a shutter speed that will go along with it. TV is time value. That's called shutter priority. Shutter priority is you select a certain shutter speed. Like maybe you want blurry pictures. Like maybe you're trying to catch some flowing motion of a dancer or something. And so you want it to be blurry. So you chose a lower shutter speed. Whatever your reason was, or you want to like freeze the action. You're catching some sporting event or some very enthusiastic toddler or baby that's walking. You set a higher shutter speed so you can like freeze that motion. And so you pick that. The camera will then pick the aperture that needs to go along with it. Okay. And then P is a program. It may show up as A for automatic. That just means the camera is going to decide all of that for you. M ends up being manual. That means that you are going to choose the aperture and you're also going to be setting the speed yourself. So the camera is not really going to be doing anything at this point. It's you completely doing everything by hand. There's some other things you'll see on your dial about modes to be in, like portrait mode. Are you taking a portrait of somebody? Are you taking a landscape like Niagara Falls, Grand Canyon? You know, a macro means extremely close up, like a flower. Night portrait. Yeah.
I was going to say one other thing that's not shown on here, but it also has, at least on the Nikon, and at least on the one I have, has an option for the ISO to also be set automatically. So in other words, it'll vary depending on the amount of light that comes in. It'll also include that as something that it can vary. It's not great. I don't use mine a great deal, but when you do need it, it's wonderful to have. So you can flip to that and it'll go from, you know, if it gets real bright, it'll bring down the ISO number. And if it's really dim, it'll automatically bring it up and allow you to get closer to what the camera thinks you're trying to come up with.
Yeah, I saw that on a Sony camera that I got to use recently. I forgot what they called it. It was like some kind of creative mode or something. But in that mode, the camera was going to select everything. It would figure out, it would change your ISO, change your shutter speed, and all that stuff. So anyway, so we have on one end completely automatic, where it does more thinking for you. And the other end we have manual. And so let's go back to talking about aperture priority and all of that stuff. So, but this is your typical dial on DSLRs. It may vary a little bit, but this is what the different symbols are. Oh, okay. The settings about sports and things like that, those are like presets. That way you don't have to think too hard about, oh, gee, what shutter speed do I need to use or what aperture should I use? Don't worry about it. Just put it in that setting and it'll kind of favor the appropriate apertures and shutter speeds. So aperture priority, right? We said this is where you choose the opening And there's something called depth of field. We talked about it last time, and on the next slide, we'll show you depth of field. Depth of field is how much is of a range is in focus. So like for us as humans, it's difficult. Our brains are just so perfect. Like, here's my object again. What'll happen is that one of the feedbacks we got was that they took a picture and they didn't realize all the stuff in the background. There was a mess of some kind. But yeah, because our brain focuses just on that object. Depth of field, we actually have it too, but it's hard for us to like notice. What depth of field is this. So my eye might focus on this mug in front of me, but what's actually happening to the lens is that there's a certain area in behind it and in front of it that's actually going to be in focus as well. The depth of that's what depth of field refers to. The way that you normally see it is the background becomes blurrier or not as blurry. And then what'll happen is when you pick your aperture, the shutter speed will be automatically adjusted, and this ends up affecting blur or freeze. Someone asked about shutter speed related to frames per second in videography. It is. That's what it is. Frames per second is what shutter speed is. And in videography, we get to use usually, the numbers that the DSLR would use, but that's exactly what it is. Okay. So here's an example of what we're talking about depth of field and what happens with apertures. So when you have this will happen even for you. Like I wear glasses. I don't need to wear glasses for this close range, but when I'm like looking at things that are far away, I have my glasses. And what happens if I can't see too far, and you probably do this too, just automatically, you'll squint, right? You squint to get things to be more in focus. When you're squinting, what you're doing is you're trying to simulate a more closed aperture. What happens is whenever, like f/22, for example, here, when you're more closed, it gives you a bigger depth of field. And so more behind that thing and more in front of that thing end up being in focus. And so we do this as humans. We'll squint, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to like close up as a little bit that we can. On the other end, if we have like a wide aperture, it's open. So you'll see here, there's like a little bit, like it goes from everything being in focus, right? The person and the mountain behind them. And slowly the mountain becomes blurrier and blurrier, but the person stays in focus. What's happening there is the depth of field, right? How much is in focus? That's the field and the depth of that. So this is a thing about aperture. Why do you choose an aperture over the other? One of the reasons can be about something like this. Now we'll go to shutter priority, right? This is where you pick the shutter speed. So you might pick a very fast shutter speed so you can freeze the action. We're going to show examples. You're going to see what we mean. Or you're going to pick something slow because you're trying to do something poetic. Somebody's dancing. You want to catch this beauty. So when you pick shutter speed, the cameras are going to choose aperture. Now, we just saw how changing the aperture changes your depth of field and what's going to be in focus, right? And so that's why it's a triangle. It's difficult sometimes to get the exact thing that you wanted. There's always this interplay of them. So here you get to see when you have a really fast shutter speed like here, this is 1/1000th of a second, you're going to freeze that moment in time. As your shutter speed becomes like a half a second, you're not freezing anything. The things are moving and you're going to be blurry. And so let's just go ahead and show you an example of that, right? You may have taken pictures like this on your DSLR or on your camera. I mean, on your phone, right? You're standing still, but people are moving. The things that are still are just fine, but the things that were moving come out blurry, right? Here we're seeing people walking across. That's blurry. There's a car that was driving, right? So this is the blur that we're talking about.
Let me just interject though. That can be a really good technique because what it does is it shows the movement of the individuals. There's enough there that you can recognize these are people, that are there. This is a car in the background. So it gives a feeling of that. And then of course, the stability of the buildings in the background is something that you can feel.
So going back, remember, context is what are you trying to express? Composition, maybe that's not the best word. Composition, what we're learning now is how do you get to express it that way, the way that you want to express it. So here, the technique is slower shutter speed. We chose it intentionally so that we could get this blur, so that we could tell that story of all the activity that's happening in this part of the street in the city, right? If we had frozen everybody, we would still get a sense of activity, but I'm going to bet that them being blurry makes you feel like something's happening compared if it had just been crystal clear. And so Bernie was just saying about how we picked these on purpose because we're trying to go for a certain effect. So here's an example of extreme blur, right? These are fun pictures to take. You just go outside and there's cars driving on the street or something, and it's dark. So what's going to happen is that most of your cameras aren't going to be sensitive enough to just quickly take a picture of it. They're going to need to have the shutter open longer to let enough light in to get some kind of working, reasonable picture. Well, the longer the shutter's open, the more blur is going to happen. So people have these interesting artistic effects that they do. Like, so this is, you don't get to see the cars, but there's cars here, right? You get to see the red lights of the cars going away from you, the headlights of the cars coming towards you. This must be from a different country than the US because these people are driving on the wrong side of the road. But but this is an example of deliberately doing that. I'm going to show you another example of deliberately choosing a slow shutter speed. So here, this is water. This is a photographer who's standing pretty still. The shutter was left open longer so that the water could move. And as the water moves, it makes these interesting, amazing trails. So sometimes we just think if something's just blurry, but maybe it was supposed to be blurry. When you do it with a reason, it's different. It's not, it's no longer a defect of the picture. You actually meant for it to be that way. So this is shutter speed, right? We're not done. We're going to have one more here. This is also an interesting effect. This is done by somebody who knows how this works and is using it to their advantage. So Bernie, I think you wanted to.
Yeah, this one's really pretty amazing. If you ever try and do something like this, you'll realize what real talent it takes to do it. But what's happened is the fellow that took this picture was following the motorcycle and moving his camera and keeping him really still, and then at a certain point snapped the picture. But he snapped it slow enough that he stayed with the motorcycle, and that's really tricky because the motorcycle is really sharp, so he had to keep really even, but as a result he blurred the whole background. And like I say, that's a professional to be able to do that, but it makes a really nice effect.
So a way that you can do this, it's easier on a DSLR or if your phone, if you have one of these apps, is what's happening is that thing is moving. And what you do is you need to move with it. You need to track its motion. So what happens is you basically try to keep it in the middle or something. But as you move your camera, that thing will kind of stay in the middle. But everything else, that wasn't moving, right? That's basically what's happening in pictures like these. There are lots of pictures like this where but it's basically it's you move the camera just enough to be in sync with that thing that's moving, and then you get this. So it's an interesting surreal effect. It's pretty cool. Now let's go look at not all this blurriness. High shutter speeds, you can get some amazing things like this. Hopefully you've all seen a hummingbird. I get to see them once in a while. They're so amazing. But the wings are fluttering so fast. So you can only catch this kind of picture with a high shutter speed. I don't know what shutter speed this was, but is definitely not the low ones that we were seeing before, right? And what we just saw about things being blurry. So to get things to be sharp, you're going to have to use a high shutter speed. It'll catch. Remember I talked about how the blinking, how long your eye was open? This is that. It's a very fast, slice of time is what's happening. So, and this is its own genre of pictures where people actually have like specially made high speed cameras that can shoot like thousands per second. Like your normal camera on your phone may just be like 1,000, 1,250, maybe a little bit more than that. But there are specially made cameras that can capture like 10,000 frames a second, and they have special purposes why they do that. But it's so here's another example, right? The popping of a balloon, a water balloon. Same thing. It needs to have a very high shutter speed, so it's just that split second that the balloon popped, and you get that. So that's shutter, aperture, and ISO. ISO is about light sensitivity. We can play with these from that triangle, and we get different effects. Some of the effects, we get them because we wanted to get them. Some of the effects happen, Hopefully, now that you know more about the interplay between them, you'll understand why did that happen? Why was that blurry? At least, hopefully, you have some more insight into what happened there. The camera or you were trying to balance these three things. So let's move on to the next major area that about cameras. This applies much more to DSLRs than it does to phones. Phones have their version of this, but it's not in the same complexity. This is going to be about your lens, right? This
And
is,
at this moment, Pravin,
yeah.
that's right. I'm going to have but to let you know that I have to leave at this point. I'm
Oh, okay.
committed beyond the time, so it's 2 o'clock, and I'm going to have to sign off. But thank you very much, and I hope all of you gain, the knowledge and the experience that you were looking for. Saram.
Thank you, Bernie. Um, he has an event that he has to head off to. um, so uh, the lens is like the camera's eyeglasses, right? Right. You can put on sunglasses. Things may look a different color. They'll be darker or not. You can put on reading glasses. I have reading glasses somewhere here. Where'd they go? Reading glasses help you see something that's a little bit more magnified. So lenses uh, is basically like eyeglasses or magnification or something. So they come in different. There are different types of lenses. And here's an example of a Sony camera and three lenses that are on it. This text is a little bit blurry, but wide angle, these are the names, wide angle, standard, telephoto, macro, and there's also a concept of zooming. So wide angle is typically a smaller lens. To the rightmost of these three, that's the wide angle of these three. It's not necessarily the widest angle you can have. It's just of these three, that's the wide angle lens. Standard ends up being like normal human vision. It's not like it's right, like a telescope lets you see the moon and see planets and see things like that. That's not normal human vision, right? That's a telescope looking up there, right? That's like way zoomed in, or very much enlarged. Normal vision is, what do you see when you look around, right? Things are a certain size, right? If something's far away from me, unless I get closer or it gets closer, I'm not going to be able to see all the details in it, right? So standard is basically that. Telephoto is like the telescope. Telephoto means something's far away from me. It's too far from me to walk over to, or too dangerous or something. And so for that, you use a telephoto lens. A telephoto lens, like a telescope, it just brings that closer to you. Okay. Macro is the opposite. Macro is, and you'll see this sometimes if you're trying to use a phone, or even with your own eyes. As you get older and you become like your vision changes, sometimes you can't see things that are like right next to you anymore. It's just too close. You need reading glasses to read them, right? A camera has the same problem. Something is really, really, really close. It's difficult for it to focus on it. So for that, they use a macro lens, or they can have like an attachment that gives it the macro ability. That's what macro refers to. And then a zoom, what a zoom is it's a lens that can kind of switch between these modes. So it'll have one number, which is like some wide angle-ishness that it has, and it'll have some other number, which is more for telephoto, about how much more it can do. So some zooms are pretty extreme. They go from a very wide angle to a very telephoto thing. And then a lot of zooms aren't extreme like that. They're just convenient. They're kind of like, hey, this is a little bit wider, and then here's something that's a little bit, close enough. That's more common sometimes. It's more affordable, but that's what a zoom lens does. A zoom lens can do that. On a zoom lens, sometimes you have to turn something to zoom it. And on some cameras, they may be motorized. You may have a button that just like zooms it back and forth. Video cameras usually have a motorized zoom. So let's go. So we're going to stay in this technical world a little bit. These numbers, like I know you can't make them out here, but we're going to see here, is something called focal length. So what'll happen is that you'll get a lens and somebody will say that's a 28, the millimeter. That's a 50 millimeter. That's and so on. What they're talking about is this. It's physics, right? So the back of the camera has film or the light sensor on it, right? So and that's like your eye. The back of your eye, your retina, is where the sensors are. And so what happens as you wear glasses or use binoculars or anything, you're basically changing this lens property. What I want to show you is this. Hello. Okay, see this? This part is moving further away, right? It's moving further away. This is what's referred to as the focal length. So when you hear that something is something millimeters, they're saying that that is that many millimeters away from the back of the surface that's being sensitive, right? And so in this diagram, you also see something called angle of view. What they're saying is that when you have a short focal length, when you have a wide angle, that means that you have a wide angle. That means that you can, like humans, right? Like it's kind of like this. If you just look forward, like just do this, let's look forward. Look at your object, for example. Just look forward, and without actually turning your eye, how much do you notice that are on the sides of it? Like how far to the right and how far to the left are you kind of conscious of, in your field of view, right? You'll probably end up moving your eye and it can kind of change the way that it is. But, a camera is a machine, so it doesn't have eyes to turn like that. So what'll happen is that we're referring to that. How much to the left and right of this thing is going to be in view. That's angle of view. What happens is as you become more telephoto or telescoping, right? That angle changes. It starts to become only the thing that's in front of you and hardly anything that's to the side. And it's intuitively, you'll see what that's about. Okay. So this is what both focal length, you'll see the lens has numbers on it. And that number indicates how much of this that it does. So that's what it's referring to. It's physics. Okay. The next slide is going to demonstrate more about the whole focal length kind of concept. So this is about your angle of view, right? I was saying that wide angle means that you can see a lot to your left and your right. But as you increase your telephoto, like you go to 600 millimeters, right at the extreme on this chart anyway, look at that. It's very narrow. It's not seeing too much to the right and left. It's very much focused on that. This is like if you were able to be in Puttaparthi and Prashanti and Swami comes out for darshan, you pretty much only notice Swami. You hardly notice anything else except Swami when he's walking around. You almost don't even, right? So this is kind of like that. We just get that laser vision that we just focus just on that one thing. So wide angle is the monkey mind person. They're sitting here and they're just looking around and getting distracted by all the people. So again, this chart isn't for you to memorize or anything, but just to get that principle down about field of view and what happens with these different numbers. Here's the next one is much more practical. This is what actually happens, what you actually get in the pictures that you're taking. So these are different focal lengths of lenses. This is going from 14 all the way to 400, right? So 14, you're pretty far away. And then you go up to 24, you get a little bit closer, right? So each one of these you're getting, it's not that you're getting closer, it's that thing is being magnified more and more. The lens is allowing that to come, fill up more and more of your frame. So see this at 400 millimeters and at 14, we didn't even know that there was this house or whatever this is in there. At 400, we see that there is this house or whatever this structure is, right? And so when you zoom way in, you get that. It's just like if you take a picture of the moon, right? If you look through a telescope, you can see craters on the moon. If you just look through like your eyesight or normal things, you can't always make out the craters. So this is the more practical way of understanding about focal length and what is zooming and what is wide angle and what is telephoto. So that sounds great. So here's some things to be aware of though. So wide angle, the reason that it's able to see very much to the right and very much to the left is because it is just the nature of the way the lens is. It's actually distorting things. If you were actually to go look at the things that are on the right and the left edges of the picture, you'll see that they're actually bent a little bit. That's just physics. We can't do anything about that. And so wide angle sounds cool that I can get all this into my shot, but this happened to me. I took a group shot of some people, and one of the young ladies in the picture asked me to please not put that on Facebook because she was on the side of it, and she looked a little bigger than she really is in real life, and she didn't want to be embarrassed by looking like that. And so there's little things like this that happen. So things on the edges will get distorted. This picture for dog, the dog's head and his nose is not distorted, but look, the sides are distorted, right? So that's the side effect of wide angle. The more wider angle you become, the more you're going to get this distortion. Here's another practical thing to know about lenses, and this is subtle, and it's easier to see if you actually have the lenses in front of you, okay? So this is the same person in the same room for all three of these. And when shot through a 17 millimeter lens, remember smaller numbers are wider angles. This person's face, like this is what we see. We see kind of looks like he's sticking out into us, right? We see his nose, we see his ears are behind him, right? His head seems to be kind of narrow, I guess. That's the wide angle. Then we go to 50 millimeter. So for this, they probably backed up a little bit to kind of get, his face to be about the same size. So what do you see different here? This one, let me have you either unmute or put in comments. Remember, in comments, do like share to everyone. That way I can see it, or you can share it with just me. But what's different? Whoops, sorry. What's different between this one and this one? And subsequently, you can see on 100. What do you see different as we go higher and higher, as we go from wide to telephoto? Let me ask you what you're seeing. Anybody except Bala, who already knows all this stuff. Depth of field, someone says. Do you see how he looks fatter at the 100 millimeters? Like he's flatter, right? What telephoto does is it's like you think, oh, that's great. And actually, let me go back a couple of slides here. Right? You think, oh, that's great. I get to bring that mountain, that moon much closer to me. That's true, you do. And because it's so far away, this is not as noticeable. But if you have something that's actually already kind of close to you, like a person, and you're trying to use this kind of lens, well, because it's close enough to you, things get flattened. Can you see how things are flattened? Like see here, on the 100 millimeters, his ears, they're sticking out to the side. I can see them. You can see them. They're sticking out to the side. But on the wide angle, his ears aren't sticking out like that. His face isn't as wide looking either, right? It's kind of more narrow. And so this is something to be aware of when you're taking pictures with, when you're buying a lens, is that this will happen. Is that good or bad? It's neither. It's just to be aware of it, that it's going to happen. And so the point of teaching you about these things is you took pictures and they came out a certain way, and maybe you're happy with how it came out, or maybe you're not. And you want to know, why did it come out like that? Why does that happen? These are all the little things that play into getting that the picture quality. So yeah, somebody said, yeah, the picture's getting flatter, right? Yeah. Okay, so this happens. You may not notice it right away because you may spend your whole day at 50 millimeters or your whole day at 100 millimeters. You may not notice, but that person notices. I don't know if you've ever seen this, or if you know people who are actual. I live not perfectly in LA, but I live in Southern California, and I do have friends who are actors and actresses who actually are in the movies and TV shows and things that you probably have even seen. If you ever meet a movie star person in real life or TV star person in real life, well, actually, let me ask any of you. Have you ever met a person in real life that you've been seeing on TV all the time? Maybe it could be like a news person. It could be somebody from a TV show that you enjoy. Have you ever, were they bigger or smaller than what you imagined they would be? Let's see if anybody wants to share with me. I'm not going to wait for too long, but because I want to end in about 15 minutes. Yeah, smaller. Yeah, shorter. Yeah. In real life, those people are actually smaller and shorter. Like you think, my God, how skinny is this person? They are very skinny in all this. Why is that? It's because their whole world is to be photographed or filmed, and that happens through lenses. So if you are very skinny and very short and things like that, what ends up happening is that based on what the cameras they're using, you're going to end up becoming fatter or bigger in some way. And so the successful actors, actresses, singers, any of these people who are photogenic and who are photographed a lot, that's why they tend to be smaller than you expected. In real life, they're smaller than you expected. It's because of this. Because of this lens makes everybody, there's an expression about the lens puts on, like the camera puts on 10 pounds or something like that. This is what they're referring to. Okay, so enough of me talking. Let's go back to you and make it practical. Okay, so on your phone or your DSLR or your drone, but nobody said they had one. So on your phone, what's going to happen is that when you go into your camera app, most phones nowadays have at least a wide angle and some kind of zoom or close up. And so it'll show up as some kind of X. It'll be a number like 0.5X, 0.3X, 1X, 2X, 5X, and so on. So those are magnifications, right? Those are the lenses that your phone has built into it. And a DSLR, if you actually have lenses and you are able to switch, or maybe you have a zoom lens. So let's go back one, right? See this? So 17 millimeters, they were a certain distance from this person. At 50, they backed up, because otherwise, if they didn't back up, we'd be like looking into his nose. And 100 millimeters would be looking to the bridge of his nose, right? So to keep him about the same size, they backed up to kind of keep that subject to be about the same size. What we're going to do is the same kind of thing. That object that you have, here's my mug. Take photos from, I don't expect you to have to back up because maybe you don't have the space, but if you do, that'd be great. Want you to see for yourself on your phone or on your camera, try the different magnification settings that you have, or zoom setting or whatever you have. Take one, like we did with shutter speed and aperture or whatever, at a low number of whatever that is, and then take that same picture at a high number of whatever that is. So I'll give you about a minute, and let me see if people have questions or anything that we could refer to while people are trying that exercise. Please do try the exercise, because you might think, oh, I'll do it later. You're imagining in your head what you're going to learn later. If you actually do it in the context of what we're doing as a workshop, that lesson may stick a bit better. And you might even have a question that comes out of it. Okay, so people said, yeah, people are getting smaller. Some people are shorter. Wagh said he's also bigger himself. Yeah, Zoom makes you different. Okay. Somebody asked before, but with portrait, you have more control. Yeah. When your phone is in portrait mode, they give you more controls. You don't have to use them, but you're taking portrait, and so they do give you some more controls. So let's come back. I'm going to assume that you were at least looked at your phone and tried to see what it looked like, whether you took pictures or not. So if you did, what are your observations from that? So this is easy with the phone. Like I have, this is my phone, and I have like a very wide angle, and then I also have like a more zoomed in thing. And I definitely notice on my wide angle pictures that things get distorted, like that dog picture that you saw. Not like that, but they get distorted. Did you notice any kind of, were you able to see that wide angle is not actually reality, that it's not one-to-one, right? And was the image quality any different? You can either type to the group or type to me. I'm going to go look over here on chat. Right? And so anyway, that's, yes, the people are typing to me. Yeah, so it happens, right? So what happens? So let's go back to this. Just remember this, right? Wide angle and and telephoto kind of have this side effect of making something become flatter, and that may change the nature and the story that you're able to tell. Okay, let's come back here now. Pick up. Okay, next steps. So we went a little bit slow. Bernie was going to end around here and then take off for his event, but he had to leave earlier. So we're not done. But next steps that we have for you is now, like last time we taught you about what to take pictures of, how to take a picture of a speaker at a podium, like wait for them to move their hand. Don't just take a picture when they're standing, wait for them to move their hand. Remember, we had tips like that, action shots. This time, we've gone over some of these technical things. And so normally you're probably using Zoom just as a practical thing. You want to get closer, and that's why you use the Zoom. Now that you know a little bit more about this, take your phone is always with you all the time, probably, but take your camera or your phone with you to more events and just take pictures and shoot more often at these events, even non-sci events, whether or not you're doing it for an article or not. Some of you are on media teams, and so you may be always doing things for articles and reports. That's me. I'm always taking pictures of things because they're going to be published or something. And then just practice and review it and repeat. So like when you use Zoom, you're going to, see if you can tell that Zoom is working or not. Here's a big hint I can give you about Zoom. And this is just my practical experience, especially for a phone. Don't use it. Just get closer. Get closer. When we're shooting a sci event, you're the photographer. People know that because you have this camera in your hand. It helps if you have a DSLR in your hand. But they can see that, hey, we're all singing budgeons and this person's walking around. Why is he walking around? they're walking around because you're the photographer, right? Taking pictures. So they know that you're taking a picture. And so they're not bothered as much that you are, you're not going to get in their personal space. But get closer. Don't rely on being so far away. Oh, my Samsung Galaxy phone can take pictures of the moon and all this. We're going to show you soon about, we're going to cover that soon. Yeah, maybe it can. Awesome. Awesome that you had $8,000 to buy this huge lens. But you know what? Just get closer. Your $8,000 lens is making everybody look fat and flat. And so just get closer or get further. It's nothing beats that just practical thing of you moving instead of relying purely on physics and technology. So that is something I'd really want to emphasize to you. We showed you that in the previous workshop. We showed you pictures taken from further away and closer. When you're very far away from the activity, there's just too much going on. We can't tell what you want us to focus on. What was the story? As you get closer, we start seeing the person serving somebody, right? So take your camera everywhere. This time, be aware of these topics that we had about exposure and everything. So I'm going to move on to some special topics. But before I do that, if anybody has any questions or comments, or I didn't talk about something, or maybe I'm going to talk about it next, you can unmute or you can message me. I'm going to give you about a minute to either unmute and tell me something or message. But the next couple of topics are relevant as well.
Pravin,
Yeah.
this is Roma.
Hi.
I wanted to check what are your thoughts about changing the setting to auto to make our lives easier? Does it work or it does not?
In most cases, leave it on auto. But the reason that we talked about aperture priority and shutter priority is that auto usually works just fine. Phones and cameras are very light sensitive and things usually work out just fine. But if you're finding that something was blurry in an unexpected way, now you know why it might be blurry like that, right? Now you know, oh, I was on auto, but this thing selected too slow of a shutter speed. I was on auto, but this picture still kind of came out a little bit darker than I wanted it to. And so, yeah, in most cases, auto works all the time. I use auto all the time when I'm taking pictures. I only get out of auto when I know that the camera is going to fight me and that I want a specific thing to happen. Yeah, auto is nothing wrong with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me go on to the next of our. I have two special topics, and I think I can cover them. It'll be done by 11:30. For me, in my time, it's so this workshop would be about 90 minutes, and that's pretty good. You're welcome to ask me questions, and we can go over. But so my first one that I want to tell you about is this AI. The phones have this. I'm going to guess that DSLRs may have some aspects of it, and they'll probably get more of it, but phones definitely have this. So these are enhancements on top of automatic settings. So Roma, you were just asking about using full auto. Full auto does work, but the recent Google, iPhone, Android phones, they have this AI element that got introduced. So it takes your automatic setting, and the AI aspect of it is that your camera doesn't know what you're taking a picture of, right? It doesn't know you're taking a picture of a dog or a child or a flower or what. It just knows that your subject is this close or this far from you. The lighting seems to be this way and that way. It doesn't know what you're taking a picture of. AI is able to recognize faces. A lot of DSLRs already have like a face recognition, right? If you have a DSLR or even your phone will, right? Sometimes put a rectangle around people's faces to show you that it knows about this face, this face, this face, right? So AI is able to recognize things like faces. It's able to better guess about what are you trying to do, so that when you're doing these automatic pictures, well, now that it has a better idea of what you're trying to do, you probably get better results. So this is something that comes up. So the warning, though, about AI is there's always warnings about AI. Is that sometimes it's not perfect, and it'll probably become more and more perfect. But there's always going to be that room for it not to be perfect. So what happens is that if the AI guesses wrong or makes some decision that you wouldn't have made, the photos may not be 100% accurate, because some of the nature of these enhancements may not be It's enhancing. It's actually manufacturing something that wasn't in the picture. A lot of times it manufactures something that's works okay and nobody notices. But sometimes it can manufacture something that's not realistic enough at all. This happens a lot of times when you're like retouching a picture of somebody. Um, like I don't do this with my Zoom. I don't know if I can do it while my camera's on, but right, some people will have their webcam for a meeting like this and they'll turn up everything and then their face looks so smooth and looks so young. That's not what they look like. And guess what? We all know that. We know you don't look like that because nobody looks like that, right? And so that's not AI, but it's basically an algorithm that's trying to smoothen everything out, right? So sometimes you get a result that's not exactly 100%, and it may not be as useful. So AI will have that. I want to show you something that I'm not, for or against any specific brand of phone, but I'm going to show an example of something that happened with Samsung. And I remember when this came out, I thought, wow, that's amazing. Maybe I want to get that phone next time. But, we found out eventually that it wasn't real. It was actually a trick. So they were telling you that they could take a picture of the moon and it would be so amazing, amazingly clear picture of the moon. And then you look at your own phone, and you think, oh my God, my phone can't do that. Wow, that's amazing. It turned out that they were using AI. So what they were doing was they were getting the same blurry picture that you already get on your phone today or your DSLR today, but they had AI enhancement. It's able to figure out, like you'll see right here, right? The moonshot, this one, they made it be deliberately blurry so they could kind of show you how this works. But the idea is AI, and even you can tell that the dark parts of this picture are probably the craters or something, right? You know that. So your brain doesn't necessarily see the craters in detail, but you kind of know what you're looking at as you look at it. Well, AI is able to kind of figure out that those are craters. And the more it's been trained to take pictures of the moon or of a dog or of basketball, the more it's able to tell what's broken about this picture and how can it fix it. So when you see this rightmost version, this is with they call it the scene optimizer. When the scene optimizer was off, you got this middle picture. It's not very detailed. When this feature was turned on, it knew what the moon looks like, and it was able to basically put the details in for you. We all know what the moon looks like. Your computer easily knows what the moon looks like. And so it can actually go take a real picture of the real moon and even overlay it on top in some way and blend it. There's all kinds of techniques that they can use. But this is a thing that can happen with AI, is that you may not be getting 100% reality. And sometimes it may be fine. It maybe still did a great job for you and you're happy with it. Totally fine. But you should know that what's happening behind the scenes. So that's about AI, and it becomes very phone specific. So when we do our next workshop that may be more about phones, we can maybe look at that a little bit more closely. Okay, I got just a couple of minutes left. I mean, I have more time left, but I know many of you may have to leave soon. I want to just get into really quickly editing photos. A lot of people indicated that they wanted to learn how to do some photo editing stuff. We're going to just look at it really quickly. Why? A lot of your phones have these features built into them nowadays. And so you take a picture and then there'll be something, portrait mode does this a lot. You'll be in the picture, you'll see it, and you'll have some ability to make it brighter, darker, change the focus of it. You can change some things, but you can remove things from it. And so a lot of phones already have this built into them. Let's say that it's not on your phone. Somebody sent you a picture and you need to fix this and it's not on your phone, right? So how do we fix it? Typically, we'll be using Photoshop or some program like that. There are other programs, not just Photoshop, but I'm gonna demo some stuff using Photoshop today. So what do? It's just to enhance or fix them. So we just saw the moon got enhanced. You could actually do that yourself too. We can brighten and darken things, fix up the colors, object removal, all this stuff, right? So here's an example of a classic thing that you can do. Here's before and after. Can you all see how the picture on the left is very bluish, right? And you look at the picture on the right is not bluish. I don't know if I would call it more red, but his flesh is more red and not so blue like it is on the left, right? Real flesh tones are probably not going to be what we see on the left. They're going to be closer to what we see on the right. So these are the kind of things that we can fix in photo editing, and whether it's on your phone or an app. So now I'm going to get into Photoshop and show you some examples of real life stuff with this. So there's one of these things which is called like brightness and contrast. Let me just show you what brightness and contrast means. Okay, I'm going to pull up this thing for brightness and contrast. See this gray scale here? Different. It's a gradation of different grays, right? So I don't know if you can see, but over here, I'm going to turn up the brightness, and this is a contrast. What brightness does, it makes darker things lighter, and it makes lighter things lighter. And so let's turn up the brightness. So do you see how lighter things became lighter and brighter things became brighter? But the problem is that we lost some detail. Some of the bright things exploded and they're all white. And some of the things that weren't so white, well, too bad, now they're also very white. So turning up the brightness can have that effect. Turning down the brightness has the opposite effect. Darker things, well, not that dark things become darker, but turning it down means, okay, well, things won't be as bright as they were. They won't be as light as they were. That works great for the darker things. They won't be as light as they had become. But now the things that were bright, they're not white anymore. Now they're kind of gray, right? So that's brightness, okay? And here. Contrast is related, but it's not the same thing. Contrast means, the contrast, right? Like in real life, contrast just means that two things are different. So when you play with contrast, again, watch the screen. If I turn up the contrast, contrast makes things be more different from each other or less different, like more same or more different. So high contrast makes the whites whiter and the blacks blacker. And the grays in between kind of become more of something too, right? This is different than brightness. Brightness actually made us lose some of these whites and blacks. So let me go low contrast. Low contrast says we're not going to have the whites be whiter or the blacks be blacker. What we're going to have is everything be more similar to each other. So we're not going to have these extremes anymore. So that's brightness and contrast. These are typical settings that you'll get on your phone even, right? And here I am in Photoshop. So let's get some interesting stuff. Here's what I spend a lot of my time doing all the time is I get to work with pictures of Swami all the time. And by the way, we're going to make a lot of these pictures available to devotees to download. It's not just that Pravin has it or somebody else has it. You'll all be able to get, we're releasing a lot of these pictures for this 100th birthday here. So you'll be able to download pictures like this. So here's a picture. And where's my controls? Okay. So what'll happen is that you get this picture and you want to frame it. It needs to fit in a certain space. But I don't want this uncle in the picture. The other guy, he's in the picture, but at least he's out of focus. But no, I don't want this uncle in the picture. So what can you do? So what you could do is you could crop it, right? You can crop it. So now this uncle is not in the picture. That uncle is a very nice man, by the way. When I had my first child, my son, him and his wife helped us sit closer to Swami so Swami would bless. So he's a wonderful man. But you don't know who he is, maybe, but you don't want him in your picture. You want Swami in the picture. So what I'm doing here is cropping, right? I'm changing this rectangle. I'm deciding what's going to be in it. Swami will always be in it, but I'm deciding maybe I even have part of the uncle in it or whatever, right? So this is called cropping, right? You're changing that. So, hey, that looks pretty good, but you know what? Sometimes picture frames are not this size. Picture frame may be wider. And so, oh man, my picture frame's wider. That means I'm going to have part of this uncle. Well, I don't want to have part of him cut off. That looks kind of weird, right? So maybe my picture frame is more like this, but now I have this other guy in the picture. So these are common problems that come up, right? So what we're going to do is show you that we're going to cancel all this, okay? So what can you do? So on your phone, the AI, you have the ability to actually remove people and remove things from pictures. So what'll happen is, for example, I'm here in Photoshop. So all you got to do is you come here and you pick the person or the thing that you don't want, right? And so I'm going to pick him and pick more of that. And let's see a little bit more of that. Okay, I think I got most of him, right? And so I'm not even going to tell the AI what to do. It already knows. I mean, I could tell it, I could guide it that I want to put a peacock here instead, but I'm not. I'm just going to say generate. Just go see what you want to do, AI. And so here's AI on its own, knows that I probably want to remove this person. And so we're going to see in just a moment how this person is removed. Ta-da! He's removed. And this Photoshop gives me some options of how I want to remove him. Like you see in the background, something about the background changes a little bit. Here, I actually put a person walking in there. So these are typical photo editing things. And some of these are available to you on your phone to remove people and even move them around. Next thing I want to show you is this typical thing that we have to fix. This is an old picture, which you will also get in time. You'll be able to download all these. This is too bright, right? It's overexposed. What do we do about that? Well, it's a brightness contrast problem. So let's just go, I'm going to go into levels instead. So by levels, this says this is how the whites, how the bright things are. This is how the dark things are. These ratios are brights and darks in here. So I can make it a little bit darker, right? This is a little bit more useful of a picture, right? You can almost now, this wall is no longer completely exploded. You can actually see some brickwork in there, right? So this is typical. So without anything, with something. Made the picture more useful. Sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to edit the picture. I want it to be complete reality. It's a picture of Swami after all. It is a picture of Swami after all. But you know what? Everybody, even Swami would tell you that, food needs to have some seasonings and then, and taste to it. You don't just give people bland food, right? So this is a classic thing. Let me show you another example. Oh, this one's the opposite. I cannot make out Swami. It's hard to tell, I can't make Swami out in here. Let's go back to the same levels thing. Levels is my favorite. I mean, I use the other ones too. So levels, I can just say, okay, well, let's make it brighter. Okay. I could say, let's make everything brighter, but that doesn't look right. That's crazy. What I'm going to say is, let's make pick this middle slider and just make it a little bit brighter. Okay. I'm not making it strangely brighter. I'm just tweaking it enough to make this picture be useful, right? So without anything, with something. I don't personally, I would never change Swami like drastically. We're just making the picture more useful. So here's another example. Same thing, Swami's over here. It's kind of dark on him and we're playing with levels. We can fix that. Here, I want to show you this one. This is a very subtle thing. You see Swami's hair and he's in front of a dark background. So his hair is dark. The background is dark, right? So this again, you may get a picture that comes in like this where things are kind of bright. You play with levels, but fine tuning. Why do you need to learn how to work with Photoshop and these kind of things? Because you want Swami's hair not to blend in. So you need to learn about the controls. Like here, Swami's hair and the background all became all the same thing, right? Just by tweaking it a little bit, now I start seeing Swami's hair be on top of the background, right? And so here I'm just using this one setting, and this is not a Photoshop tutorial. What I wanted to just explain to you is about the kinds of, this is a typical thing that happens is we end up editing pictures. We fix them afterwards. It's great if we didn't have to fix them afterwards, if we're able to just make everything work beautifully from the start, but it doesn't always happen. So with that, I'm going to, I'll stop talking. I'll start presenting things. If you have questions for me with the group, you can unmute and you can talk, or you can type them to me. At this point, because we're at the end, it's better if you just unmute and ask your questions. What we're going to do is, if you have questions afterwards, you can reach our whole team, not just me and Bernie, but our team. You can email us at community@SSSIO-USA. And we're also the team that makes other of the workshops, like video, audio, Canva, graphics, and things like that. And so we're here to help you. And we're here to help you be part of what we're doing. What are we doing? We're inspiring devotees. That's what we're here to do as media workers. So with that, I thank you very much. Floor is open for any questions that you have. I will also hand the mic back to Bala if he has any comments about things being sent out or Sarah.
Thank you again for sharing to both Bernie and Pravin, who Bernie, of course, has left, but thank you both. And thank you to all of you who have stayed on. I know this workshop went over the hour, but it was absolutely incredible just seeing all of these examples and hearing from two very, very expert level presenters and photographers as well. Just a quick plug. In the community, we've got a couple of workshops coming up. We have a storyboarding workshop next month. We'll have more on Canva, more on photography, like Pravin alluded to before. We'll have some more content about phone photography specifically. We'll also talk about editing photos, whether it's using Canva, Photoshop, or a different software that's not subscription-based called Affinity. if you haven't joined our community, media community, you can fill out the survey form and get a link to join the community on WhatsApp. That's SSSIO.info/US-media. And if you have any feedback, we always would love to learn more and welcome the feedback. You can send us the data, the information submitted through info/media-feedback. And finally, if you have not registered for the workshop but would like to receive the post-workshop materials, which include a quick tooltip from Pravin and Bernie, as well as the video to the workshop, please send us an email at community@SSSIO.US. And same thing if you have any questions. Thank you so much. I believe that was it from all of us. Thank you again. Have a good weekend. Sarah.